What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Brand podcast. And today we are going to be going over some really cool Etsy data from actual buyers. And this was a little internal survey that we did. And we've got some numbers to share with you. And some of these numbers are quite shocking, to be honest with you. And we are going to share all of that because why? Well, I think we can learn from what actual buyers are doing. Like, what's their behavior? What are they actually looking for? Do images really matter? Do titles really matter for the buyer? Do reviews really matter? All of those things, we're going to get down to the bottom of it because we have real people answering these questions, and the real people are actually people that buy on Etsy. So that's what we're going to be doing here today on this episode. And Chris is going to be going through all the data because, well, Chris is great with data. He loves data. He dreams about data. He just uses data all the time. So he's just like obsessed with it. So we're going to hand the keys over to him today and let him really drive this because it is really important. And when he was sharing some of these statistics with me, it got me excited because a lot of the things that we've already been doing are important, super important. And what we're talking about is like, what actually does a buyer look for? And do they do the things that we're assuming that they do that turn them into a buyer? And that's really what we're going to be talking about. So if you guys have any questions while we're doing this, or if you have maybe any feedback of your own, or maybe some of the things that we're talking about, you can maybe relate to that and go, yeah, I do that. And then maybe we can get a little bit more data from everyone here that is watching this or here that is with us live. So Chris, where do you want to go, man? I think I teed this up for you quite nicely. So where do you want to begin?
First things first, I want to address the rumor that you just created that I dream about data. I like data, just not that much.
Oh, come on.
I'm all about making data-driven decisions, right? Because in business, 95% of doing more in business is about doing more of what works and less of what doesn't. And especially in the Etsy world, Scott, we have a ton of things that people say are absolute facts. And if we never question those things, or we never look at the actual data that buyers can give us, then we may be wasting a lot of our time and spending time, energy, and effort on things that don't give us the return on the investment. So what we wanted to do with this data was get a better understanding of what buyers are actually looking for when they come to your Etsy listing, what creates that buyer behavior, and what are some of the things potentially where we can save some time. Where should we invest that limited time that we all have to get the most return on that investment? And a few of these things, just based on common sense and what we've known about data in the past, are going to be a little bit obvious. And some of these things really kind of blew my mind. And I know you and I were talking about this a little bit last week when I was hanging out at your place. And some of these things, should probably change the way that you are doing things on Etsy, depending on what your approach has been. One of the questions that you and I get all the time is, why do we advocate for the niche-based approach? Well, it turns out there's some data points in here that really back up what has been our opinion for a little while here and some of the rationale that we had. And so we were curious, is that opinion? Is that fact? What does that look like? So a few of these points are obvious. A few of these points are really interesting. And a few of these points, I think, will change some of the foundational assumptions that we've made about Etsy in the past.
Yeah, no, I love it because, again, like, we're assuming just from business sense, right? Like, we're like, okay, one customer, we want that customer to buy more. We want that person to come in and kind of come through our store or our shop and go through that buyer experience as much as we can. But does it really matter? Because a lot of the Etsy so-called gurus out there are saying it doesn't really matter about building a brand. It doesn't really matter if you just want to sell like random products and random niches all over the place. It doesn't really matter. And maybe it doesn't matter as far as like, are there people still going to buy that stuff? Yes, but can you do better? Can you have a buyer not just buy once, but can you have them buy multiple times and things like that? Or how can you stand out when everyone else is doing the same thing? So those are the things that I think are really going to make this useful. But Chris, I'm just going to say, get into it, man. Like start giving us some of these data points, maybe walk through some of the questions and give us their, the percentages of like how many people are actually doing this stuff. And then we can expand on that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me know, Scott, when that pops up here on
You're
the
good,
screen.
man.
And before we jumped into this, I wanted to start with just a little bit of basic information about who's buying stuff on Etsy and how that breaks down. And I did mention a minute ago, some of this stuff is going to be rather obvious. And I think this first data point here should be pretty obvious. We've known for a while that Etsy skews fairly female. And in our survey, we actually surveyed a few hundred buyers of Etsy products and verified that they've made purchases within the last year. So this is all recent data. 83%, 83.2, if we want to get technical about it, were female, 16.8% were male. Not really a huge surprise there, just given the things that sell most popularly on Etsy, that tends to skew a little more female, right? If you are running a very male generated shop, like male focused shop, it's not going to do as well on Etsy as something that appeals more to the female market. That should be something that I think a lot of people kind of assumed, but we wanted to verify that all of these things were not just assumptions and were actual data points. This is something, Scott, this is the first one that really kind of stuck out to me here, because one of the rumors that we hear all of the time is that everybody who buys on Etsy goes in and buys once per year, and they buy one gift or whatever, and then they never come back to the site. And while the majority of people, 58.4%, said that they have 1 to 5 purchases within the last year, we also had 40% of buyers who made more than 5 purchases within the last year. And this is something I think that people really need to start to wrap their head around, because yes, while the majority have between that 1 to 5 purchases, obviously there's going to be people in that group that had more than one to begin with, but a huge portion, 40%, purchased more than 6 times, and 15.6%, almost 16%, purchased basically once a month or more inside of the Etsy platform. And that is the first thing that really stuck out to me as a data point that I think a lot of people miss, because they think Etsy customers are kind of one and done. And while you do have a good chunk of people who will only buy once or twice a year, the people who are buying more than that are 40+%, right? We had that first group at 1 to 5. And even if we assume the vast majority of those people, 90% of those people only had one purchase, that means you're still around 50% of people who are purchasing more than once on the platform. 26% are buying 6 or more times, between 6 and 10 times, and almost 16% of buyers are purchasing essentially once a month on the platform. And I know this is something you and I talked a little bit about in the Q4 training last week. And this is something I want people to start to think about, because if these people are buying so frequently, that means we have the chance to get them again and again and again. And there's some more data later on that I wanted to go through that I think will kind of reinforce this point about how important these repeat purchasers can be in terms of your strategy for setting up the shop. But with that out of the way, I wanted to dive into what everybody's really here for, which is what makes people want to buy your stuff. What are the things, what are the levers that we can pull to really start to get our buyers interested? And the very first thing that we asked about, because it's essentially the first thing that most people deal with once they get to your product listing, is how important is an easy to read product title? And we did this on a scale of 1 to 10 across all of the buyers that we surveyed, and we got an average of 7.5. So having an easy to read, easy to understand title is something that's extremely important. And this is the first big mistake that I see a lot of Etsy sellers making. And I know you've seen this as well, Scott. People just try to shove in all of the different keywords, and it says Halloween, Halloween, Halloween t-shirt, Halloween pumpkin, right? Or something like that. And while that is a readable title from a computer standpoint, and you've gotten the word Halloween in there, it's not exactly a human readable title. And buyers are telling us that being able to understand the title is one of the first things that they really look at. And to back that up a little bit, we wanted to dive a little bit deeper, and we saw that 1% of people said they never even look at the title. 31% of people said they only sometimes read the title. 68% of the people said that they always read the title. And remember, they're also telling us that this has to be something that they can read and understand in order for them to buy, right? An 8 out of 10 on how likely they are to make that an important factor. 68% of people are always reading the title. They want it to be human readable. So when you're going in, you're creating your titles on Etsy, make sure, yes, you want to have your keywords in there, but write it in a way that a human being can understand, and you're not just trying to shove all of the keywords in there. The second thing that we wanted to take a look, go ahead. I think you're muted there.
So many people think that they have to cram a whole bunch of keywords in that title. And the thing is you don't. Okay. You want that 1 or 2 keywords that you're going after. That's the number one thing. After that, yes, put them in where they make sense. But we know now also that tags are being used to get indexed for being searched on Etsy. Okay. We know that because inside of Etsy, when you go into your ads manager, they're now saying, hey, you should probably use these tags because it's going to help you have more exposure. So they're literally telling us that tags do help you get found. So don't worry about cramming in every last keyword in the title. You want it to be readable. It also looks nicer. So that's what I would recommend there. So anyone that's thinking about, like titles or like, I got to cram everything in there, you don't. Okay. So go ahead, Chris.
I would say the other thing that we know based on how the Etsy SEO algorithm works is that we don't have to repeat keywords even in the tags, right? If it's in our title, if it's in our description, if it's in our tag somewhere, we pass that swipe left, swipe right Tinder test that Etsy has to say, does this make sense to show to somebody? And then we have to worry about the rest of the Etsy SEO algorithm after we've gotten that keyword or keyword phrase in there one time. And the buyer data is telling us that if we can make this human readable, then that is something that's going to massively influence purchase decisions. And I would rather have people buying my stuff than potentially rank 1% better and have no one be able to buy it. The second thing that we took a look at are product photos. And this is the thing that really kind of blew my mind. We always have known that product photos are important, but on a scale of 1 to 10, the Etsy buyers that filled out this survey said photos on how important they are on that scale of 1 to 10, 9.23. This was the number one thing that we saw in terms of buyers saying this is super important. Why might that be? Well, the obvious answer is they want to see the product. They need to understand what they're going to get. And since they can't pick it up, they can't hold it, they can't do anything like that, they're going to rely heavily on the photos in making that purchase decision. 96% of buyers said that they always look at the photos, and 4% said they only sometimes look at the photos. But again, if we take a look at these two together, almost as important as could possibly be, and 96% of people are always looking at the photos. There are so many listings within the Etsy platform that are using 1, 2, maybe 3 photos and not using all of those supporting images. This data to me tells me that instead of worrying about shoving all the keywords into the title, the biggest thing that we can do is spend that little bit of extra time rather than trying to find the perfect keyword combination on creating better images for our listings. And I know, Scott, photos are something that are near and dear to your heart. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share in terms of the quality and quantity of images? You're muted again. You're muted, Scott. Hey, Scott, you're muted.
Am I still muted that whole time?
Yeah, I told you 2 or 3 times, but you're going on a tear.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we're going to have to fill in the blanks there. What I was basically saying was, is that you have to understand that people are going in to those images. So it's the number one driver. It's getting the click, number one, but then it's also showing other use cases. But another thing that you can use one of those image slots for, which will also bump your conversions, and this is something that we're going to be doing, is putting a review in there. So literally taking a review and then clipping out, you can screenshot it, or you can take an image and then, or an image slot, put 5 gold stars on it if they gave you a 5-star, and then just quote something that they said and maybe a little picture of your product. That way they're going to see the review, even if they didn't go look for the review. So that's another little thing that I would do. So that's what I just said there while I was muted that no one could hear me say.
You looked really passionate while you were doing it.
I was passionate.
So we, kind of alongside of that, we also asked how important are product videos to the purchase decision. And this one surprised me just a little bit, but I think there's something else going on here. And it's because videos are fairly new to the Etsy platform. Buyers only rated videos as a 4 out of 10, a 4.01 if we want to get really nerdy about the data. But Scott, does that mean videos don't matter? Since obviously photos matter substantially more, right? They're saying almost 10, right? It was like 9.2 versus a 4 out of 10. Photos obviously matter more, but do videos still matter?
Yeah, they matter. And here's where the video is being used in a way that will get people to click in. And that is, the video is playing, right? So even though someone doesn't maybe click into your listing and then watch that video is going to auto play. There's no sound to it. So it's going to auto play as someone is scrolling. That's where the video will help you. So in this survey, it was like, do you watch the video? And people are like, no, not really. Like, what's 4 or 5% said that they do. But what we didn't survey was like, did you click because there was a video playing that got your attention? And that's hard to say, yeah, that's why I clicked. We don't know that psychologically. We just might have saw it. It got our attention and then we clicked in. So that's where I would say videos are important and they are very useful.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have the survey data to back that up, but we do have the real world data of saying, hey, when you put that on, you typically will see a higher click-through rate from search. So views versus visits, I think, is the terminology. The number of people who are seeing it in search versus the number of people who are actually making it to the listing. That's where you start to see that make a difference. So is it worth creating a video? Absolutely, yes. Is that going to be the thing that creates the conversion? No, but it is the thing that creates the ability for you to get the conversion because it's bringing more people into the shop to begin with. Scott, this is another one that blew my mind because when we're talking about Etsy SEO, the number one thing that people focus on is the title. They say, get your title right, get your tags right, and all of those kinds of things. But you and I know, and everybody that's hanging out with us knows because they're very, very, very smart people, and they've listened to us rant and rave about Etsy SEO. They know that traffic and conversions is the thing that really drives that algorithm. So when we start taking a look at the product description, which is kind of the redheaded stepchild, the forgotten portion of the Etsy listings, buyers, people who are buying on the platform, rate this almost as highly as they rate photos. They are saying the product description on a scale of 1 to 10 is an 8.5 in terms of how likely it is to influence their conversion. So to me, this is a place where we need to be paying more attention. And how do we do this? How do we improve this? The best way to do this is to make sure that we're doing essentially the same thing we're doing on the image side. Your product description is not a place to shove a bunch of keywords that you think will help you rank on Etsy. If you have something that you want to include, try to include it in your title, try to include it in your tags. Again, make sure that title is human readable. But the reason that buyers rely on the product description is the same reason that they rely on the product photos. They cannot pick up your cup. They can't pick up your mug. They can't pick up your t-shirt. They can't flip it over. They don't have the ability to look at the tag. So they want to know what it's made of. They want to know what it is and what it isn't. And if we're not including all of that information in our product description, and we're just committing the SEO error that I see so many Etsy sellers making of trying to include as many keywords in there as possible, we are doing this wrong. The product description is something that's extremely important to buyers, and it's almost always overlooked. Backing that up, we had 68% of buyers say that they always read the product description, and 32% said that they sometimes read the product description. We did have some people say that they don't bother to look at product photos. We had no one in this survey say that they don't read the product description. That was another little thing that really stood out to me, is that everybody is looking at it in at least some context. Now, if they've bought something from you in the past, maybe they're not relying on that as much, but we're seeing almost everybody looking at this, at least in some capacity, and 68% of people are reading this every time they come to your listing. So if you're not spending a little bit of extra time on your product photos and your product description, you're missing out on a ton of conversion possibilities. One of the things we often hear talked about, Scott, are product reviews. Interestingly, even though this did score fairly high in terms of how important are reviews in the purchase decision, we're seeing this at a 7.69, a 7.7. So it's not as important as that product description, which kind of surprised me because in a lot of other platforms, people ignore, like Amazon specifically, people just look at the star rating and they don't look at the product description. Here, people are relying more on the product description than they are on the reviews. I know this is something that people don't spend a lot of time focusing on, and this is something that I think is gaining even more importance on the Etsy platform, but it's definitely something that has a massively influential effect on people's ability to purchase from you and their desire to purchase your products. Interestingly, backing this up, we see that 59% of people always read reviews. 41% of people only sometimes read reviews. And Scott, I know one question that we'll get, and it's a question that we get all the time, is should I wait to start promoting my listing? Given this data, right? 60% of people say they always read reviews. You guys advocate for running ads. Does this influence that decision one way or another for you, knowing that 60% of people, give or take, right, 59, are going to read those reviews before they purchase? Does that in any way influence the advice that we've given about running ads on new products?
No, I mean, again, there's 41% that say sometimes read, right? So even if we brought that down to 30% that don't read reviews or reviews aren't as important, you still have an opportunity. The difference there is when you are new, that's where your pricing strategy is going to come into the mix. And that's where you're going to want to have really good images, really good listings with a really good price. And then that will get those sales going. And then that will start to get your reviews. So you kind of have to prime the pump in a sense. And that's why we always talk about in the very beginning, we're not looking at like making a profit so much as getting reviews, getting sales velocity, and all of those things. So with that being said, can you still get sales without reviews? The answer is absolutely 100% yes. So, yeah.
I would say the other thing that I think a lot of people miss there is if you don't have specific product reviews, Etsy in most cases backfills that data with shop reviews. So even the people who are saying that they always read reviews don't necessarily know as a buyer that that's what they're doing. They're just looking down and they're saying, hey, they got 3 or 4 sales on something else. Etsy's backfilling that data with other reviews from your shop because they know that it influences conversions. So this isn't something I would stress too much about, but it is something that we should think about on the back end of sales in terms of making sure that we have our follow-ups in place, making sure that we're providing a good customer experience, because the more products we sell, the more chances we have to get reviews, and the more reviews we have specifically related to that product, the more likely we are to sell that based on that data. And that makes a little bit of common sense. Go ahead.
Yeah. Real quick. I'd like to poll our audience here. Like, do you need to read a review before you make a purchase? So just put that in the comments. I'd like to see what we get here. And that's for you watching here live or you watching this on the replay after the fact. This way here, we can pull a little bit more, data here. So that would be good. So yeah. Chris, what about you? Do you have to read reviews before you buy something?
It depends. And I knew that's the answer that you were shooting for, which is hilarious. Yeah. You knew I was going to say it. Or as somebody on Facebook just said, not necessarily. If I know enough about the product that I can make an intelligent decision one way or another, then I don't need that. What I have noticed as being an e-com seller myself is that most reviews are hot garbage. It's like 5 stars or 1 star, right? They're like terrible experience. Never got my product. I'm like, okay, then you can't rate it. Or best thing ever. So though they tend to not be very helpful, what I like to do is I actually look for like the 3 or 4 star reviews, like that middle group. And that usually gives you the most information, but not having reviews on a product is not going to stop me from buying it if it's something that I think is interesting or something that I think would make a good gift for family, friends, anything like that, which is really what you're buying for the most part inside of the Etsy platform. It's a very giftable platform. So for me personally, I don't always look at reviews. And when I do, I look at them very skeptically. I'm not looking at the star ratings. Is it a 4.5 star? I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the actual review data, if that makes sense, 2, 3, and 4 star type reviews, just to see what happens. And I'm seeing in the comments, I like to see that there are some reviews. No, I don't look at them, not necessarily Juice 0618 says, I usually read a review. Some other people are saying it depends on the product, right? And that makes sense. That kind of corresponds with this data. And Scott, one thing, and this is something we get questions about all the time. One thing we wanted to specifically ask about was cost of shipping. How likely are people to buy a product if they have to pay for shipping? And this was something that really stuck out to me. Now, the average here was 6.3, saying buyers are more likely than not to still purchase a product if they have to pay for shipping. But the data point here that really stuck out to me is the vast majority of people actually came in here at a score of 5, meaning it depends entirely on the product. To me, what this data tells me is that if we can include shipping in the cost of the product, it's going to massively increase our conversion rate. Why? Because they're still saying they're likely to buy it if they have to pay for shipping. Yes, but remember, this data is an average of what we're seeing. So if a bunch of people said, I'm still willing to buy it no matter what the shipping cost, that's going to influence this. But the vast majority of respondents actually came in between a 4, 5, and 6. So kind of right on the bubble in this range, which to me indicates if we can include the cost of shipping, it just eliminates that as a variable, and it's going to help us increase our conversion rates. The other thing that people ask us all the time is, does price point matter? And can I compete with people who are selling $10 t-shirts or $10 sweatshirts? Should I still launch a sweatshirt if I have to charge $25 for it? And so we wanted to ask a little bit about price. And this piece of data was something that was really interesting to me personally, because we know there's a market for things at every price point. And what people were saying, 82% of respondents said price is only one of many things that I think about. So if we're doing a better job on the other stuff in the listing, we have a better title that's more human readable. We have a better product description that clearly defines what the product is. We have good product photos that show off what the product is, that we can get away with charging a higher price because it's only one of many things that people are thinking about. 13% of buyers, almost 14% of buyers said it's the most important thing. And 3.5% of people said it's not something that they consider at all. Now, the data for the market at large tends to skew more evenly across these three things. So this tells me that Etsy buyers are a little bit more price sensitive than buyers in e-commerce at large, because you have things like luxury brands that sell and you still can capture 15, 20, 30% of the market. And if price was extremely important, then we would see these shake out a little bit differently. On Etsy, it appears that people are a little more price sensitive.
Yeah, Chris, I would say here, like, so think about, I'm thinking about myself, right? If I'm looking at a sweatshirt, like I'm looking at something that I want that's good quality. I don't want a chintzy one that you would buy like in one of the vacation shops along Myrtle Beach or whatever, right? Like I don't want to buy that thin, really lightweight, not really well constructed. So if I see one that's, let's say a sweatshirt was $29.99 and I saw another one that was $39.99, I wouldn't bat an eye. Like I'd go for the one that was more expensive because I want the better quality. And I'm kind of conditioned that good sweatshirts, like good quality sweatshirts, are usually 40 to 50 bucks. Like they just are. Right now, if you were talking about a $70 sweatshirt, like a Nike or something, then I'm like, okay, well, they're getting it because it's the brand. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a better quality, but I think if you're within that range, but if you're just competing head to head with someone that has the same identical product, then yeah, that's going to be hard. But I look at it like if I'm looking at a type of product like that, like a sweatshirt, I'm just using that as an example, then I'm probably going to go after the one that's more expensive because I want better quality. And I'm going to think to myself, because it's more expensive, it's got to be better quality. So that's what I would think.
That I think is the psychological trick that most people miss. If you have a higher price point, it's kind of assumed that it's a higher quality. And if we can back that up with better quality product photos, a well-written description, a human readable title, then we don't really have to worry about the price point. This to me also plays into that last data point that we were talking about, Scott, this having to pay for shipping. You and I have talked about the trick that a lot of Etsy sellers try to play on the SEO algorithm to get more clicks by having a low price and then charging for shipping on the back end. To me, when people are talking about price, they're not talking about how much they have to pay right on the page. That it's the total amount that they have to pay, taxes, shipping, all of those kinds of things. And that's why they say it's only one thing that I have to think about. The vast majority of sellers or buyers rather it's something that they're going to consider. They're not going to pay $700 for a sweatshirt necessarily, but if your all-in price is $20, they're going to give you a little bit of benefit of the doubt in terms of quality. And if you have, you're not playing price games, people are going to be less sensitive to that as well, because everybody has had the experience. They add something to their cart. It says $13. You get the checkout. There's $48 in shipping. You're like, how did this get to, what is that, $61? Like, I don't even understand how that works. And so that's when they become price sensitive, when it's a surprise. So if we can combine these two data points together and say, all right, if we have to include shipping because we think that that's going to increase conversion rate based on the data, then we can charge a higher price and have that be an okay thing. It's not going to be the thing that really determines whether or not somebody's going to buy it. Is it a fit for what they're looking for? And do they perceive the value that you are asking for out of that price? So is it worth $30? If the answer is yes, based on what they're seeing in the product photos, in how likely they are to buy it, like the thing that they want, does it match that? And the product description, you're saying, yes, it's 100% cotton, it's this, it's this, it's this. If it checks all those boxes, people are not as price sensitive as most people think they are. To me, this is also, you don't want to try to play price games, right? Like you and I have talked in the past, there's always going to be somebody that can sell it cheaper. So there's no reason to do that. Price things at a price point that makes sense for you and for your brand. And if you sell fewer of them, that's okay. But keep in mind that if you have to charge a little bit more to make money, that's not going to be the determining factor for most people in whether they buy from you or not. The last thing I wanted to touch on here, Scott, is does your shop matter? And this is something that we have talked about a bunch of different times. We get YouTube comments all the time that says, nobody goes to the shop page. We've gotten them on these lives. No one goes to your shop page. You don't have to worry about it. It doesn't matter what kind of shop you have. You can sell whatever you want. And we wanted to test that assumption for a couple of reasons. One, we are advocates of a niche-based approach because everywhere else on the internet, when you use that type of an approach, you tend to see an increase in sales. And the assumption would be that that carries over into Etsy. But because we always want to follow the data and we don't just want to have our assumptions, just like everybody else has their assumptions, we asked a few different questions on, does your shop page matter? The first thing that we asked was, how likely are you and how often do you read the about the seller section? And Scott, this is a question that we get all the time because you and I talk about putting the important information in the shop announcement, not necessarily in the about us section of your shop page. And what we saw was only about half of people, 55% of people, even sometimes read the about section. Why? Well, it's kind of buried, to be quite honest. And so we wanted to test that theory. That's why we are big advocates for using that shop announcement section to talk about who you are, why your shop is what it is, and all of those kinds of things. 32% of people never bother to read the about, and 11% of people scroll the whole way to the bottom of every shop page that they visit, and they always read that about section. It's not to say that you shouldn't be filling this out, but if you can use up that shop announcement space to communicate all of the important information rather than worrying about the about us section of your shop page, it's probably going to get you a little bit further with buyers. Overall, how likely were all buyers on the Etsy platform to visit a seller's shop page? They said about 73% of them would do it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, it was 7.3 that they're going to click through. Anybody that they buy from or that they visit a product listing for, they're going to click through and take a look at the shop page. This was probably the single biggest piece of data that I found interesting out of all of this. And Scott, we've talked about people say that there's only, people buy once a year on Etsy. If that, people will just go to whatever listing is the cheapest. People will do this, people will do that. So we wanted to ask the question, how likely are you to buy from a shop that you previously bought from? If this number is low, it means that we can really kind of get away with that general store model because the only time anybody's going to buy from us is when they're searching for a product. They're going to find whatever product is the cheapest or whatever. They're going to buy it, and then they're never going to think about us ever again. Out of the hundreds of buyers that we surveyed, 85% or 8.5 out of 10 said that they were extremely likely, right? So this was a 1 to 10 scale. They were in the 85th percentile. They said 8.5 out of 10. This is something that almost everybody is doing when they purchase on Etsy. So yes, while 54, 56% of people are buying 1 to 5 times per year, when they come back and buy again, they are still just as likely to purchase from a shop that they bought from previously. And if we look at how that data breaks down across those different buyer groups, this was something that was really interesting to me. 85% was that average. But when we look at those 1 to 5 purchases, the people who purchase least frequently on Etsy, they said 80% of those people said that they were extremely likely to repeat buy from the same shop. 88.9% of the people in that second group, so every other month or more on Etsy they're making a purchase, this was almost 89% of those people said that they go and visit shop pages on people that they've previously purchased from. The most frequent buyers on Etsy, the people who are making almost a purchase a month or more, 96% of those people said that they are going to the shop page of shops that they have visited previously. And this, to me, one, really validates the niche approach, and two, explains why Etsy is doing some of the things that they're doing in terms of starting to favor brands that have a coherent niche. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And it's exactly what we've been saying. I'm just glad that we finally have some data, that states exactly what we have been saying is like, to get people to come back and buy from you again is what we should be thinking about. And this here proves it. So yes, we want people to come back, but the other way that they can come back is, well, when we list new products, we run sales, we do whatever inside of that shop, they might have favorited it. Now they're going to get notifications and now they're going to come back to our shop, which is going to be familiar because they've already been there and they're going to convert higher. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so 85% of buyers are repeat buying, whether that's once a year, every other month, or essentially every month from the shops they have purchased from previously. And Scott, that kind of wraps up the insights that we have from this. I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of questions that come in, but having seen this data now, I know you and I talked about a few of these data points. Does this change your strategy in any way? Does this give you a little bit of clarity on what you should be doing? And is there a quick way that we can kind of recap what everybody is seeing here in terms of how we can start to implement what we're seeing into creating more sales from essentially less effort based on what we know buyer behavior is on Etsy?
Yeah, well, I would go back through this video, all right? And I would make notes and I would make sure that I am focusing on these areas, right? So if I'm looking at my title, I'm going to create a good title that is readable, that is not a whole bunch of stuffed keywords, and I'm going to make sure that that's optimized. I'm going to make sure that my images are very professional looking, and the main image needs to be the one that is your best image, and also one that is really close up of the product. The video slot, that there, maybe people aren't watching the video as much, but we do think that scrolling, that's going to stop the scroll, it's going to get attention. So that's something else that I would do. The description, people said they read them. So let's make sure that we utilize that space, not just for SEO purposes now, but for conversion. So this way here, people can actually hear more about the product. Maybe you have details about the product, things like that. Also in the images, I'll go back a little bit and also putting in like a review or two in there, because that way there it forces people to actually see it because they're in there already. So that would be the other thing. And then yes, pay attention to your shop, make it cohesive, make products in there related to each other. So that way there you can have repeat buyers. And then that way there, you're able to follow up with those people automatically, whether it's someone favorites your shop, you get a notification because you just ran a sale or you have a new product or anything like that. So no, everything that we just covered really does follow the mindset of us as far as like building a brand and then having that approach where we don't just want to sell one thing to one person. We want to sell one thing to that one person, but we want to sell other things. And maybe right there in that same shopping experience, we're going to then be able to sell 2, 3, 4 different products and create an order. Instead of it being $30, it's going to be $90. And so it pretty much kind of made us feel like, okay, we're not crazy here. And we're not just saying this, it's actually data from real buyers. So that would be a quick little summary or recap that I would say that I would be thinking about. Chris, what about you?
The very first thing would be, if you are still going after a bunch of different niches, that I would stop doing that immediately, right? stop doing the general store thing, because if you are, you're missing out on all of these repeat purchases from buyers. And this is something, Scott, that you and I kind of assumed, but the data really starts to back it up. Yes, we can throw as many lines in the water as possible, but the people who purchase most frequently on the Etsy platform, 96% of those people are saying they try to buy from the same shop. And if they're not finding additional products that they are interested in, because you go from bass fishing to dog catching to vegan to carnivore to whatever in the products that you're creating, you're missing out on all of those repeat purchases. But even if you decide that that's not something that you want to do, you want to try to constantly acquire more customers, which the data tells us that you don't have to do within the Etsy platform to be successful, then what are the things that we should be really taking a look at? The most important thing, the thing that had the biggest impact for buyers, was having good quality product photos. Make sure that you are taking the time, energy, and effort to do everything that you can to fill out all of those image slots. Not everyone looks at them, but the vast majority of people look at them. And when they do, it is the most influential part of their purchase decision. The other thing that people need to be spending more time on is product descriptions, right? Everybody gets so focused on the keywords in their title and their tags and all of those kinds of things that they forget about the product description. That was really the second most influential thing that people said, hey, this is what I look at when I go buy. And one of the questions, Scott, that you and I get all of the time is, why can't I just launch 30 products a day? And the answer that we've always given is because you can't be sure that you're creating good quality listings when you do that. Take the extra 10 minutes to create a good quality product description. It's going to increase your conversions. The other thing I think that I would point out for a lot of people is the price sensitivity thing. A lot of people are afraid that if they charge a few dollars more than the cheapest listing, that nobody's going to buy their product. If we're doing the other things correctly, then we don't have to worry about that. We can actually charge a little bit more, even on a platform like Etsy, and still create those conversions. So for me, it would be niche, and then really focusing on creating good quality product listings. Take good quality photos, show off as much of the product as you possibly can, and spend the extra time on that product description, and then come back, make sure your titles are readable by human beings and not just the Etsy SEO algorithm.
Cool. Okay, we're going to answer a couple of questions. We're going to do a speed round here, but I did want to bring this up. If you guys are new here, or you guys are wanting to kind of go through our brand strategy and how we do it, definitely check out the 64K roadmap. This is something that we put together, I don't know, several months ago. And it was really what we did last year for my wife's Etsy shop. And we kind of just broke it down step by step. That would be probably very useful because it follows this kind of like this data, right, that we've already been talking about. So check that out, brandcreators.com/64K. And you can check that out. And the other thing is if you wanted to go through one of our trainings, we have a 7-day cha-ching challenge that basically takes you through all of the different things as far as getting sales through optimizing, through launching the right products, running sales properly. All of that stuff is inside of that. If you want to go through that, you can get all the information over at brandcreators.com/sales. All right. And there is a cost to that one. It's not that much, but there is a cost to it. But it is a 7-day, what we call the cha-ching challenge, because the goal is for you to get your phone to start cha-chinging. So that's that. And then the free thing that we have for you is this here, and you can get that roadmap immediately. We also have a couple of videos there that you can watch as well. And that's it. That's what I got. So Chris, any quick questions we can wrap up here with?
Yeah, our buddy Milton over on YouTube said, do you price everything in US dollars regardless of where you live? No, price it in your bank account currency. Why? Etsy charges a currency conversion fee that you can avoid if you create your listings in your local currency. Why would I suggest doing that? Well, because Etsy is going to automatically convert the listings to the currency of the person looking at the listing anyway. So if they live in Canada, it's going to be in Canadian dollars. If they live in Australia, it's going to be in Australian dollars. If they live in Colombia, it's going to be pesos. If they live in the US, it's going to be US dollars. It doesn't matter if you put it in pesos originally, if you put it in euros, it's going to reflect to whatever the user has set to their currency. And so you can actually avoid a fee by not pricing in US dollars if you don't live in the US and are not receiving payments in the US as well. Ashlyn said, I research variations of the type of product I'm selling. I want to optimize my design time for quick reviews. Would you focus on the type of designs that have the most sales, or the highest conversions. And so to me, what I would be looking at is what is getting the most sales first, and then which types of listings, what are they doing in the listings that have the highest conversions? And I would be pairing those two things together. What are the highest converting listings doing that the highest selling listings aren't? And if we can combine those two things, then we're going to have a high selling listing with a high conversion rate and get the best of both worlds. You guys keep talking about good titles. Would this be a good title? Halloween Black Cat Witch T-shirt top, Halloween Celestial Cat shirt with aesthetic crescent moon, gift for cat lovers holiday apparel. What is it? Right? If I can't tell you what it is by reading that, then that's not really a human readable title. Now, I can start to parse that and say it's probably a T-shirt. We probably don't need the word top in there. So is there a way that we can rewrite this to say it's a Halloween Celestial Black Cat T-shirt with aesthetic crescent moon? That would be a much more human readable version of that. We don't need to have Halloween in there a bunch of times. We don't need to have cat in there a bunch of times. Any of those kinds of things tend to make that more confusing than it is human readable. And it doesn't actually give us any additional Etsy SEO benefit, because what they're looking at are the individual words and then the combinations of those words. So we don't have to try to shove in Halloween Celestial Cat, because we already have cat and Halloween in there. So if there's a way that we can rewrite that to make it a coherent sentence that somebody would understand what the T-shirt is, it's a black cat in front of a crescent moon, it's for Halloween, awesome. Then that would be a better version.
I would say on that too, Chris, just focus on the long tail keyword. And long tail, I mean, like, what is someone searching for that would find that? So if it's like Halloween cat shirt for women, like maybe that's it, right? Or for teacher, or like whatever, like find out what that is. I do the research, and that would be the first one that you would put in there. And then those additional ones, like great gift for cat lover, or cat gift, cat lover gift, like that might be put in there as well, because that's what's being searched for. But like Chris said, you're not going to want to put, you don't need to put a top in there because people aren't searching for the top, right?
Can you give us a quick rundown of what's in a good description? Would it start with something like enjoy your morning brew with our Halloween mug, or just the benefits of the mug? There's nothing wrong with starting that out with a catchy little sentence, but we want to communicate two things. What is the product, and what is the benefit that it brings to the person? Now, people really confuse like product features, like, oh, it's 100% this type of acrylic, or, like whatever. And while including that is kind of important, the more important way of including that in the product description is saying it's made from this material, and here's why that matters. You want to communicate why each of those things matter. No one really knows outside of the print-on-demand world what's the 5,000 T-shirt, Scott, the Gildan 5,000, right? Yeah. No one knows what that is. So why does it matter to somebody? Buyers aren't really searching for a specific fabric of a T-shirt. They might say 100% cotton, something like that. But what is the benefit of the thing that we are selling? And then how does it tie into the rest of the listing? So it's okay to get creative at the beginning, but really what we want to communicate in those product descriptions are what is the product made of, not in a features format, but in a benefits format. How will it benefit the person who is getting it? Is it moisture wicking? Is it never a no sweat glass? Like what is the reason that they would want to buy that versus any other product? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, awesome. All right, guys. I know you guys have more questions, but we are going to have to wrap up today. We do have a hard stop, but we will be back here, and we will also be answering any questions in the comments. So if you do have any, make sure that you drop them in there. Also, do me a favor, smash that like button for me. Would you do that? Give it a little love. And this way here, other people will be able to see it, and we'll be able to help more people. If you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, you probably want to do that as well, because we're posting new videos every single week, and we're doing lives every single week. So make sure that you do subscribe to the channel, and let someone know, let one person know about this YouTube channel, and about this Facebook group, and about the podcast, and just help us spread the word out there. All right. So that's it. That's going to wrap it up. As always, guys, take care, take action, have an awesome, amazing day, and we'll see you right back here in the next episode.